Hello, everyone. All right. We are in part 3. Well, what we've designated part 3 because it's all one big section. But it is exciting. I think the action has officially started as of this section. And
that's what I thought too.
Yes, the plot is paying off.
Yeah. All that slow build tension is now coming to fruition.
Yes.
So I personally was like, oh, this is really all the good stuff. And I love the section with the dapple grays, like the horses, because that's really where I think the action starts to take off, in my opinion. But I would love to hear what you guys loved about this section, because so many good things.
There was so many good things. I have to say, though, the very first chapter, like, it just dives right in. That chapter between Donglers and Monte Cristo was amazing. Like, that whole discussion, I loved it so much. I made a note that I felt like in that section, Cristo was playing with Donglers like a hunting cat. We had a cat growing up who would always be leaving us treats on the doorstep, right? Like, our cat was a hunter. And it was exactly like that. He was just toying with him. It was brilliant. I loved it so much. And there was actually I tabbed one spot. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Once more, Donglers bit his lips. It was the second time he had been worsted, and this time on his own ground. His forced politeness sat awkwardly upon him and approached almost to impertinence. Monte Cristo, on the contrary, preserved a graceful suavity of demeanor, aided by a certain degree of simplicity he could assume at pleasure, and thus possessed the advantage.
That whole conversation was like, Dongler's like, I'm going to get this guy. I was like, the whole time. Just backtracking.
Yeah.
You just know every time that the count is referenced, you're like, yep, he's got a plan. It's shown very very heavily all the time.
Oh,
he's
yeah.
got a plan.
Especially in this section, because like I wrote that down too. Like, he is playing the long game, right? He has planned this out, and it is amazing the level of, he just went to much greater levels than I even anticipated. Yeah, amazing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. He saw this out like a game of chess almost.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Where he fully intends to win. So it's a game of chess, but he's planned out all his moves, and he seems to have a pretty good idea of how other people are going to react as well, so that he fully intends to win this game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Christy, that's true. It's hard to tell how other people are necessarily going to react to everything, but he has a good pulse on what makes everybody tick.
Yes.
In order to pull off this revenge, he really needs that.
Yeah,
definitely.
Pretty terrifying. I think my favorite thing so far was I really loved the section with the telegraph operator. I was like, oh boy. I was happy too that he got rich, off of that. It's like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. That was very interesting and also just to see how like an early telegraph system worked. That was fascinating too, just how the whole thing was set up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So many interesting things about like his little moving pieces through all of the little plot points. And I really love the horses because it shows how he's able to manipulate both families with one single movement.
Yes.
Like, by overbuying the horses, he's able to destroy the Danglers' marriage. And then he's also able then to have the Villefors be indebted to him because he knows that the horses are going to be like crazy when he hears that the Villefors are going to be borrowing the carriage with the horses and save them.
Yeah.
All by one little move of buying the horses.
That was pretty masterful.
Yeah. It was. Yeah, it's really amazing I don't know if I got that impression of him from the very beginning, that he was that he thought like a chess player. You were totally right by saying that, Naomi, like that he's playing a game of chess. Like I wouldn't have gotten that impression that that's how his mind worked or thought at the beginning of the novel before he went to prison. But now, like his mind is just definitely like, this is my plan and I've thought this many steps ahead. Incredible. Yeah.
That's true. He's changed as he matured quite a bit.
Yes. Yeah. I loved also in the very next chapter, then his encounter with Villefort. So you get this, like in this section, you get right away, boom, he has this great encounter with Donglers, and then boom, another great encounter with Villefort. And what I loved was they had this discussion about justice, and Villefort has no idea, of course, where Monte Cristo is coming from. And so again, like it was just another great encounter. And then I did another note here about his thoughts about justice, which I thought was really interesting. He said, I know all that, for it is the justice of all countries, especially that I have occupied myself. It is with the criminal procedures of all nations that I have compared natural justice. And I must say, sir, that it is the law of primitive nations, that is the law of retaliation, that I have most frequently found to be according to the law of God.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was interesting because I don't agree with it, but it's a really interesting, like, view into his mind, right? Like that he is so focused on retaliation, on revenge, and that he's convinced himself by touring the world and looking at all the ways that different people, have justice in their countries. He's convinced himself that retaliation is God's way.
Yeah.
Yep. It's like he's taking a popularity poll and he's like, and this is the way I'm going to go.
That's right.
Yeah, that was interesting. That he
I think it's
studied
also
all the
interesting
ways.
that no one's recognizing him again, but Juliet recognized him or thought she recognized his voice. Like she was also, I think it's just something where everyone's fooled by his looks and like how he's grown up. But whenever someone hears him first, they don't think that he's someone else. They think that he was the first one. And then the only one who wasn't fooled was Morel.
Yes.
I'm not remembering the pronunciation now. But like he's the only one who was like, no, it was Edmond Dantes from like the beginning.
Yes.
But Juliet was like, I think they know that person. Just like Mercedes had been wondering before.
Yeah.
Yes.
So all these little things, it's just very interesting.
He's had a couple brushes with near recognition.
Yeah. But everyone's like, that's just impossible that he'd be everywhere. So
yes.
Yeah. The other interesting thing in this section was how much we got of all the families and then like the second generation. They're really coming to the fore now in this section, right? With Valentine and Morel, like the son of the original Morel. And oh yeah, his name's Maximilian. I had to write it down. I couldn't keep everybody's names together. But yeah, like just to see all the second generation and to see like who's engaged to who, but who wants to marry who and how it's not, the same. And I'm curious to see what Monte Cristo's plan is with the second generation. Like I seem to feel it feels like he wants to play around there, or like I don't know, like I haven't been able to figure out how he feels about the second generation, if he has the same level of hatred for them just because they're the kids as he does for the first. So because of that, I can't figure out where he's going with this. Like if he has a plan, for the ones that he likes, if it's going to be good, or if he just plans to just take out everybody.
Yeah, like if he's going to make the children suffer for the parents' decisions.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of hard to tell at this point because they all are like one family unit, essentially. And the only one who's really different from their parents that we can tell so far is Valentine. Because she obviously has said that her stepmother hates her. Her father's never around. And she's very clearly been shown as opposite and in love with Maximilian. So
yes,
it's very interesting.
And caring for her grandfather.
caring for her grandfather, which
So
I loved
sweet.
that scene, and I love their communication of talking like through the will and like going through the
Yeah.
alphabet and the dictionary.
How much patience would you need to have to communicate with someone like that? You know, like that is not easy, but she obviously loves her grandfather.
Yes. So sweet. She's like his lifeline.
Yeah. And I loved that scene with the lawyers and the will, because I was rooting for him the whole time. I was like, please let them, you know, be willing to at least try to communicate with him, because like, how can you even imagine to be in that position where you have something you desperately need to say and most people don't have the patience to let you try and communicate it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the fact that the language, or like the sign language essentially that they had created, was so easy to understand was also helpful, that like she could be his translator, but everyone could understand that she was not like making up words for him.
That's
So
right.
that was very helpful in doing that.
Yeah.
The yes and no were very clear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
When he said that he could help her, I was like, how on earth are you going to help her? But became clear very quickly. We didn't have to wait long for that one.
No, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think her mother is definitely like an evil stepmother in like low-key terms. Like the way that she talks about her stepdaughter, and like the way that we've heard about her, she's not a nice lady.
No.
So that's going to be interesting going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I was also very curious about that in this section, the first time when the Count of Monte Cristo has that conversation with Madame Villefort. That made me so curious. I was like, what is going on in this conversation? Like, there seemed to be so much under the surface that wasn't being said. And I was like, what is happening here? I was so curious. So obviously there's going to be more coming from that, but I was like, what is happening in this conversation?
I think it's also interesting that she asked him like twice within several years about poisons. Like,
yeah,
that's suspicious.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Who are you planning on poisoning there, Madame de Villefort?
yeah.
Exactly.
So,
or has she been poisoning someone? Like, is she also playing a long game?
she seems very, very interesting and maybe logical and suspiciously analytical in a bad way. So Green Stick Cottage says she's loving the book, and all it takes is money.
Yeah, no kidding. So much money.
So much money. I'm like, how does he get that much money? I still don't understand how he had like that much treasure and he turned it into that much money. I don't get it.
Well, I mean, obviously the jewels that were included with the gold must have been high value jewels.
Was it like
too,
investments?
Right? Like,
I don't know.
What?
Was it like investments? I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm sure he did some investing.
Yeah. And Sarah, my cousin, she's read the book before. Monte Cristo creating an online popularity poll.
Yeah. Excellent.
No, yes. Oh, yeah. I'm getting nervous when when people start to recognize him. That's it is kind of true. I'm also like, I hope that he doesn't get too recognized, but at the same time, I wonder what would happen if he was recognized and people like called him on it. I wonder how.
I'm hoping that at some point that does happen, but I really hope that it doesn't happen till the very end, right? Because I want to know how all this plays out before people recognize.
In the scene when he was talking about, the crime that had occurred in his house, and he brought everybody out in the courtyard. For a minute, I thought that he was going to be like, the crime was, and tell what happened to him. I was like, oh, it's happening!
Oh, yeah.
We have like 400 pages left.
I thought it was interesting in that scene, though, that he lied and said that he dug up the baby. That was interesting because he knows that's not true, but maybe it's because he doesn't know how much they know.
I think that's probably it.
Yeah, because obviously Villefort survives that, but then he doesn't know, like, did Villefort do any investigating? Although you'd think with all of his planning, he would have learned about that as well, because obviously from a later conversation between Villefort and Madame Danglars, you know, he has spent years trying to find out what happened.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to also, now that we know who the parents are of that child, who is like Andre, or the like, or Benedicto, whatever name you want to call him by, he is the half sibling of Valentine and Eugenie. So
yes,
because of that now, especially now that Danglars is like, actually, I want him to marry my daughter, not knowing that they are half siblings. That's something else of interest.
Yes. I was wondering about that too. I was like, how nasty is Monte Cristo going to get? Like, is he going to try and encourage a marriage like that and then possibly reveal their true relationship, right? Like, because that would be pretty, that would be pretty mean.
Yeah. Well, it also shows Madame Danglars' like true colors if she cheated on her first husband, and then like he found out, and now she's cheating with the younger man on her second husband. Like, I was just like, this is a pattern that, I mean, man, the husbands of her, I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
Watch out. But yeah, very interesting, I think, revealing the two parents of that child. Because I assumed it was both Villefort and his first wife. Or not Villefort and someone else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So fascinating. And then, of course, we had this surprise return of Caderousse, you know, in the, I think it was chapter 64. He returns and he has that conversation with Andre. That was
Michael, we are talking all spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, you shouldn't watch. But if you want to enjoy spoilers, go for it. Your choice.
Oh yes, we are major spoilery.
Yeah.
Yes, but so having Caderousse back is so interesting, and the way he's kind of blackmailing Andre to give him money. Yeah, it just makes me wonder how much more of a role is he gonna play.
Yeah, and before I thought he was not that bad of a guy. I was like, oh well, he's just easily led astray by other people, and now it's like, no, he's as bad as he was before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about the whole murder scene. Wow. That was a while ago that I listened to that.
Mm-hmm.
That was really intense.
So Sarah said that her Valentine's grandfather, this is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. He is, and I think it's just like, because we saw him before when he was just Villefort's father. Now he's the grandfather trying to protect his granddaughter. And Book Time with Elvis is a brilliant book and loosely based on a true story, which I don't know that. So I
wow.
Know more.
Is it really?
Thank you for letting us know.
You're going to send us on a research rabbit hole.
I will definitely go down a rabbit hole for that.
No kidding.
Cool. Yeah. And then Kevatin Reed says, I also thought he was investing it. So yeah, it's been 8 to 10 years since he broke out of prison.
Yeah.
That's probably the only way he's had so many millions and millions, and he's still able to give away like so many diamonds and jewels, and I don't know. Like, he just throws money around as if it's nothing to him.
Yeah. So, I mean, it must have been immense initially, and then, yeah, he must have invested it and just gained more.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when he bought the horses for like such a high price, and it's
And then just
like,
gave them back, no cost
yeah.
return.
With an additional diamond on one of the horse's fancy hats or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah. So Rodella says that she also assumed it was Villefort's first wife. So I just think that like it makes it an assumption because you just assume Villefort's trying to hide a body, not like hide a secret affair with the body.
Mhm.
Except for the fact, see, I don't know if I ever thought that because it was not his house. I was like, why are they meeting or in what? Because wasn't it his wife? Wait, whose house was it? His wife's house? His
I thought it was his
grandparents'
first
house?
wife's house because it was part of Valentine's dowry.
Oh, that's right. The first wife's house. First wife's parents' house?
Maybe something like that, I think.
It was confusing enough for me to think that it wouldn't have been that there was something nefarious going on, that it wasn't just an established marriage or something. Because why would they be meeting in somebody else's house?
Makes sense.
Yeah. But that whole scene with, Monte Cristo is just playing with them, and he takes them up to that room that everything else in the house he's changed, but that room he's left the same, and he's just playing with them. And then he shows them the secret passage down to the garden. And I'm just like, again, like you just get that, he's a hunting cat. He's just playing with his.
Well,
What's the
even
word?
before he has them come up, it's really interesting to me because he says something about the play. Did you catch that? Where he's like saying something. Oh, I don't even think I tagged it, but it was like they're talking about like the dinner and all the things, and then he's going and then he's like, first we eat and then the play. And I'm like, what do you mean the play? There's like no actors, there's no show going on. And then they go all the way upstairs to the room, and it's like, were those two the actors in the play that he's referring to?
I think so.
Like,
because he knows it's going to be a show.
Well, basically, yeah. Like, I feel like that's what it was, but because there's nothing else that he could have been referring to, right? Like there was no performance element going on except for the fact that he was showing that room to those individuals, and the only two who would have known the value of that room was Villefort and Madame Danglars.
Yeah.
So they would have had to be the actors in that hypothetical play.
Yeah. Actors who didn't know they were acting.
Yeah.
Again, very Shakespearean.
Mm-hmm.
All the play.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
Yes.
Yes. So, Michael, my translation is this big one. I don't know what translator that is, but I can quickly check.
I wonder if anybody knows. I have this Wordsworth Classic Edition. I think it's from the 90s, but there is no translator listed, which I thought was odd to not list the translator.
My translator is listed as anonymous. So
okay.
It's just like a general translation. So it might be the same as Janelle's, probably is.
Maybe.
That most of them are using, because my audiobook has the same exact wording as does the ebook, which I think is just probably a general translation, which I'm enjoying this translation. But
my ebook does not list the translator either, but it's from Project Gutenberg.
Yeah.
And my audiobook doesn't either. It's really weird. I've never I've never had trouble before finding the translator.
Yeah. Someone obviously put a lot of work in there just to be completely unknown.
Yes.
Not a small book to do for nothing.
Yeah.
Yes. Rodella says that Dumas obviously put a lot of work into the Grandfather's Code. I think that would have been something of a challenge to figure out how to make that character have a language to speak without having a mouth to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's impressive too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah, the Monte Cristo's wealth reminds her of Smaug's treasure from the Hobbit movies. Just an endless of mountains full of treasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Scrooge
Kinda.
McDuck playing in his piles of coins.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we haven't finished the book. Yes, we're just talking up to the point where the Count has been invited to the summer ball, because that's where we ended off with that chapter. I read it before, so I'm not spoiling anything else that's after that fact. But I haven't read it for several years, so some of the facts are very vague in my mind. But as I've been reading it, some things are a lot more clear now, which I'm excited to continue reading about certain characters and how they get their end result. So it's very interesting.
I like that Franz is coming back. Like they've been talking about him in this chapter, or in this section. But I like that I'm assuming it's in the next section he'll be coming back. I liked him, and so I'm curious because we've been getting it from, the marriage between him and
Valentine.
Yeah.
Is it Valentine?
Yes, he's engaged to her.
And who is Albert engaged to?
Eugenie Donglers.
Right. I keep getting them all mixed up. I don't know why. But yeah, so I mean, we're getting, we know that she doesn't want to marry him, that she loves somebody else. And I'm curious to know what he thinks about this arranged marriage, because he obviously hasn't spent very much time with her.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting because as the reader, we like Franz from our previous experience with him, but then we're being introduced to Valentine as a good character who's very careful with her grandfather and loves him, and we're like, oh, but she should have true love. So it's but we don't.
And
want
she doesn't
Franz
like Franz.
It's hard for us then to have this dilemma, but I think if they haven't had a relationship, an actual connection, then it's hopefully things all work out for the best for him and her, right? But that's hard for us to wrap our head around. Yeah. Well, Book Time with Elvis has made a video about the Count of Cristo, so we can all go check that out.
Oh, and is it a full spoilery video? Oh, the true story. Oh,
perfect.
All right, Book Time with Elvis. I'm gonna check it out.
Sarah said that Shakespearean, the play is a thing to catch the conscience of the king.
Totally. Hello, Hamlet.
Exactly.
Book Time with Elvis. How spoilery is your video for the Count of Monte Cristo, since I haven't finished reading it yet? Should I save the video until I'm done the book? Yes,
good question. And then Robin Bust is an excellent translation of the Count of Cristo. Book Time with Elvis says also. So, yeah. Yes, and the next section should be very intriguing, because I think with the highlight of this section, or the focus, we broke it down, I think, into really good sections. I unintentionally did this, when I was just looking at the amount of pages, but I think we broke it down into a section where this one's all about the Villeforts and the Danglars, and next one we're starting into Ferdinand and Mercedes. We're going into that section, I think, more about them. So that'll be interesting.
That was good too, because when Albert comes back and he goes immediately to see Monte Cristo, and he talks about his time away with his mother and how all they talked about was Monte Cristo. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. I'm definitely excited to see more of Mercedes and Ferdinand and see how that interplays with the Count, because I know the movie version. So the movie version, what they do is they make all of the bad guys into one character, which is Ferdinand. And obviously for the length of a 2-hour or less film, they have to minimize the amount of villains, because they can't just go into 3 different revenge stories at once. They have to go down to one character, and they do a good job, in my opinion, even though it's not great, but it's a good movie, and it's because they have to minimize the amount of villains. So I think when it comes down to looking at Ferdinand, it's an interesting mix, because the movie does portray him as the big bad guy, whereas in this, you're obviously following multiple bad guys. So it'll be interesting to read about him without watching the movie aspect of that.
Yeah, I've never seen the movie, so I think that's very interesting. Do you know if they've ever done a mini series?
I think there has been a miniseries. I believe it was it an anime series I heard about?
Oh,
I
that's
think
fun.
Sarah, my cousin who's in the chat, talked about it. So Sarah, if you know, please let us know. And because I think there's been a full miniseries, or not miniseries, but like TV show about it. Because that's the only way I think you could really accomplish this book.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
get it done properly.
Definitely.
So, yeah. Yes. Well, Sarah does have a comment about the Valentine engagement. So, with the whole Valentine engagement situation showing how Damas is creating a three-dimensional world. Franz is a great guy, but we suddenly change perspective and he's an obstacle.
So. That's very true, Sarah. Good point.
Yes. I think the movie does do the time cuts, like the time jump between prison to when he's now suddenly the Count. So there is those time jumps, but only one villain. They can't really do three.
That is interesting. Usually in like works of literature, when there's like multiple villains, they're kind of standing for different things. So now I'm like thinking in my head, like there's Ferdinand.
I think his name is Ferdinand. I don't know. Whatever.
One of those. Sorry. It's been a while since I physically read that name.
Yes.
So he obviously wanted the girl. He wanted the girl. And then Danglars wanted the position of greater authority. And then so yeah. Was the other one like,
well, Villefort represents justice. Sorry, my voice is not there for a second. Like the lack of justice in that situation.
Right.
Villefort. And again, that was all about ambition, right? He pushed Monte Cristo under the bus. It was all about ambition. He wanted to.
Right. And then
climb the ladder.
And then the one we were talking about earlier, who was like, well, maybe he was just led astray. What is his name again? Caderousse. He wanted money, which we found out with him and his wife. They were very excited to get the jewel and all that. And then murder a man for his money. So they all have different motives. They all want different things, and they're willing to do evil for those motives.
Yeah, so then to apply all of those motives to one person?
To one man. Yeah.
He's like a super villain.
Yeah.
We're entering Bond level villain territory here.
Yeah. I think if they do it well considering the movie, but at the same time, it obviously doesn't have the depth that a 1,000-page novel has. So that's what you just got to do.
Yeah.
So
I think
represent lust, greed, and sloth. Yeah, I can see that. They definitely
sloth is Villefort.
Maybe that would be Danglars for like not wanting to work for that position, but just getting it.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then Villefort is the greed. And Fernand is the lust. That's very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. So my favorite villain so far, I think, is Villefort. I think he's like starting to crumble at this point. But I think it's really interesting how their stories are coming to fruition. Like Danglars' story, I think we're seeing a lot more of his revenge tale in this first little section.
Oh yeah, with him losing all of his money. That was great. And then he goes to the Count. That was great too, actually, then the Count was like, yeah, but you're just third rate. And Danglars was so offended. He's like, what? I have lots of money. How can you call me third rate? Yeah. But that was interesting to see, like, and that was all the Count, right? He's just slowly chipping away at Danglars' stash. I think that's so great. And then but then also that scene where Danglars confronts his wife about the money and saying it's your fault I lost it, so you have to pay, or your boyfriend has to pay. What's that guy's name? I can't remember.
His name was like Lucian. I know that was his first name. Like,
yeah,
his last name was. But yeah, it was very interesting. I think his family is slowly being torn apart. He's now reconsidering his daughter's engagement, so that could be torn apart. He's losing all his money. He might go bankrupt, and who's to say what will happen to him after that? So his life is fully deteriorating.
Yeah. And Villefort is getting there, but I don't think Villefort is quite as far along. Like, he is deteriorating, but
he's like
it
at the
seems
start
to be
of the
really
process.
just in that one aspect, just with that, like, things are coming out that he may have buried the child of this. And that child may have been alive. But the rest of his life so far seems to be okay.
I think he prides himself on secrets. Like, Villefort prides himself on the ability to keep things under wraps. And now that things are starting to come out, I think he's going to start panicking more and losing the ability to have control.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
So now we really do need to see Fernand now, because we've had kind of the start of the crumble of the two other villains. So
Yes.
What's the Count going to do with Fernand?
Mm-hmm. I keep waiting for him and Mercedes to pop back in.
Yes.
But they'll, I'm sure, be the, finale.
It'll be very interesting for sure. Mm-hmm. So she thinks that Caderousse is sloth, which I would 100% agree with, and Villefort
definitely. Definitely Caderousse is sloth. Oh yeah, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He wants money without having to work for it. Definitely.
He definitely seems lazy. Yeah, and he's more about not losing his respectability. He's so about appearance, right? Like,
yep.
It's all about what he looks like. So.
Yeah, that's totally connected to his ambition, right? Ambition and reputation. It all gets wrapped up right into.
Mm-hmm. So Ferdinand, lust, Villefort, pride, Caderousse, sloth, and Danglars, greed. I would 100% agree with that. That seems about accurate.
Yeah.
So Sarah has answered the question. So she hasn't seen it, but there is an anime about the Count Monte Cristo, and also a mini-series.
Oh, Gerard Depardieu.
This guy, which I will not try to pronounce his last name.
I always thought it was Depardieu, but
okay, great. There we go. So
I only know that from the 90s movies that I've seen him in.
So at this point, are we at this point thinking of the Count as like an anti-hero or a hero or also a villain, or what are we thinking of him as?
Good question.
Because I'm hoping that by the end, maybe talking with Mercedes and seeing how she feels about him getting revenge on everybody will help him overcome his fatal flaw and stop trying to act like God. But we'll have to see what he ends up deciding. Because right now he's put this plan into, he's taken years and years and years to build this plan. So it's not going to be like an easy thing for him to just give up on revenge.
Yeah.
It's interesting, because I would almost have to say that he plays all three roles in this book, right? Because in the beginning he's the hero, and then he's kind of turns into an anti-hero, but by this point I honestly think that he's a villain by this point in the book, because he is actively destroying people. So, but it's weird as the reader, because he's the guy that you sympathize with. So it's really uncomfortable for the reader to sympathize with the guy who's turned into a villain. But I really hope that there's a redemption arc, that he kind of goes back full circle and ends up the hero again at the end.
Yes.
But I hope so too. I'm not 100% convinced that that'll happen, but that's what I want to happen.
I think this is one of the most interesting books because of that, where we start off with him as the hero, and then he definitely has the turning point where he becomes this villainous person where he's intently going out and purposely destroying people's lives. Like when he went, I think the crossing the line point is where we are at. Before this, I think he was just like in the prep stages, and then he chose to go out and intently take money from people and intently destroy marriages and intently do all these things. So that's where he crossed the line into villain. So I think it's an interesting point where this is a book about a person who is the hero and a villain at the same book, just not at the same time.
Yeah.
So
but it makes like the story is so much more complicated than there are books out now where the main character, let's say the main character is a sociopath or a psychopath or something and is going around killing everybody, right? But you can't say that that person is the hero who becomes the villain. They're the villain throughout the story. Yeah. It's just that you're reading it from their perspective. Whereas the Count of Monte Cristo is far more complicated because he is the hero, and then he becomes an anti-hero, and then he becomes a full-on villain, and then who knows? Because we haven't finished it yet. So I like that more because it really causes the reader to struggle through, am I on board with this? Do I still like this guy? I'm supposed to like him because he's the main character, but like I just think it's way more engaging for the reader than a book where it's just from the psychopath's perspective or whatever, and you know he's the villain all the way through, and you're like, no, I don't have any sympathy for you. Because even though Monte Cristo is the villain now at this point in the book, I still end up having sympathy for him. Even though I don't agree with what he's doing, there is still this level of, on a certain level, I understand what he's doing. I may not agree with it, but I do understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting paradox to have because of how we've been developed into liking him so much at the beginning. And now we still know it's him, but we have this turmoil in us. So I think that's why this book is such an interesting dynamic to have. And I think that's also why it's lasted for so long and why it's such a good classic, in my opinion.
Oh, yes. Have you maintained tabbing all the points where he's like talked about being pale or a vampire? Or
I didn't this week. I was so tired and I just listened. I had to rush through reading. I finished it this morning. I was like, I don't have time.
Yeah. But I did notice a few things because like there were comments where he doesn't seem to eat. Mm-hmm. You know, he invites people to that dinner party at his house, for example, but they commented that he didn't eat himself. That happened a few times, and a few more comments about how pale he is. And like, I think that is a really interesting little, what does that mean?
Countess G was like, he's even paler than before. Okay. Yeah. So there's,
I wonder if it's like a comment on the fact that, you know, all of this is like eating him up inside, or even that he's dead inside, right?
Mm. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He's still okay. I like finding symbolism and stuff like that in stories. I'm not very good at it, but I just think it's fun and interesting. So he's come back from the grave and all that stuff we've seen earlier in the story, but he's still kind of like the undead. So yeah, I bet that symbolism is there on purpose. I wonder what will happen at the end. If he'll regain his color when he if
he's suddenly hungry for some reason or tired,
right?
If he's suddenly hungry,
he can't sleep.
But I mean, like, it could mean like that his heart is a stone at this point, which it totally is, right? Like, he's not open to love; he is all about hate at this point. So it does, I guess, it does make sense to talk about him in that way of being undead and pale and not eating. Because his heart is stone, or he's dead inside. Like, that's very interesting. We'll have to keep our eye on all of that in this next section.
It's very interesting, and I noticed that I noticed it was never mentioned in other commentaries, like or on like Cliff Notes or whatever. Like it was just never mentioned. I was like, how interesting, because there's a lot of notes of it in the book.
Yeah. You picked it up, Naomi.
So here, as to Ferdinand Mercedes, the Countess already established a good relationship with her son Albert. Is he tearing the family from Ferdinand?
Oh.
That could be the start of it. That we're just haven't seen from that perspective yet.
Yeah. Could be. That's very interesting.
And I need to see him neither as the hero or a villain, but mostly a sad, lonely man. I can't imagine spending 10 years of your life doing all this. I hope he's happier in the end, or / it's worth it. So.
Exactly. That's the question. Will it be worth it? Will this revenge have been worth it? Good question.
Yeah, he puts flesh on the archetype of hero or villain, where he's somewhere in the middle because he's slightly more complex, than just hero or just villain.
He's the whole range. He's the whole scale.
He's very human.
Yeah. So an angel of destruction.
Rodella disagrees.
He doesn't seem like a real person at the moment. Even in private, he seems supernatural.
See, now that's another interesting way to look at his being undead, right? Like, is he an agent of destruction as opposed to a real person? Do you know, like, like how Miss Marple is sometimes, referred to as Nemesis, the goddess of retribution. Like, it makes you wonder, is she a real person or is she actually like... So in the same way, I mean, we know he's a real person, but by this point, like, he really is this agent.
You wonder. Yeah. So Caderousse, Ferdinand, Danglars, and Villefort all deserve Monte Cristo's revenge, but their offspring do not, except for maybe Benedetto, because he basically killed his loving adoptive mother.
Yeah. Benedetto is awful. What an awful character.
And he's being paid to be the son, the Andrea son.
So who is it, do you... Because I think that Monte Cristo is setting him up to become engaged to somebody's child. Who do you think?
I think Eugenie. I think the Danglars.
Danglars?
Because I think he's trying to save Albert from the engagement.
Right.
But I don't know.
And he's Danglars. He's Madame Danglars' son, right? I keep getting all of this. So I need to make like a chart with like all the characters and their relationships.
A big family tree.
And then it doesn't help me too, because we have the people's names, but their titles also. And then sometimes I get confused, right? Like sometimes I forget that it's Albert when they talk about like someone Monte or whatever. Like I'll forget. I'm like, who is this Monte person? I'm like, oh right, it's Albert.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very interesting. It's very difficult to keep on track of everybody.
Similar to Russian literature.
Yes. It's chapter 1, Edmund were to meet Count Monte Cristo, he'd be very deeply disturbed. That would be he would never be okay with that guy.
Yeah.
And then Penny says, I do too, Janelle. I have lots of sympathy for him if he was a real person. I would not feel sorry for him, but as a character in the story, I'm rooting for him. That's the struggle.
Yeah.
I think classics do make you kind of dig in and think about these things, which is why I love them. They're like Janelle said, there are a lot of modern revenge stories, but I feel like not all of them are close to this complex,
It's true. I think it's because it's also so big, we get the whole complexity of it. You just have to power through the massive foundation, which is wonderful to read once you realize how it all plays into it.
No, it's great. I mean, Dumont takes his time to build his story, and he's not afraid of a long story. He's happy to just build this and not leave anything out, and I love that. That's why, I mean, I totally think that it's good to have some books that are so big. Like I know some people are just like, why would I read a 1,000-page book? And I don't want every book I read to be 1,000 pages for sure. Sometimes the story needs it, you need to play out this. Yeah.
You don't want this. I feel like if it wasn't so deep, it would feel like Monte Cristo, like the Count, is just one note. He's only wanting revenge. And at least because we have this long depth and this long back history of him, he doesn't feel one note. And that's why we actually root for him when we know we probably shouldn't. If you were just to like read what he does on paper, like just read the actual actions, you'd be like, oh, this guy's awful. You wouldn't want him to win.
Mhm.
But because of that, because you get the back history, then you actually care.
Well, and because you also get, even once he becomes the Count of Monte Cristo, not everything he does is evil. Like, we get Dumas writes in those scenes where we see him being nice to people or helping people out, and which further complicates it for the reader, because you're like, is he a bad guy or not? Like, I'm so confused, right? Like, because he does do really awful things, but then you get these scenes where he does nice things too. So you're like,
Complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sarah says the supernatural portrayal of him reminds me of ghost stories where the ghost is so fixated on a single goal that can no longer see moral nuances.
Yes, that's so true.
Yeah. He's no longer cares about right or wrong. He wants what he wants.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Benedito would be an awesome psychopath protagonist.
I don't think I would like that story.
No.
He'd be the good, like the lead if you were reading a book that was led by a villain. I think he'd be very interesting to follow there. But
yeah, what an awful guy. And it's interesting actually to kind of to compare him to Monte Cristo, because at this point I would say they're both villains. But I don't know, part of me wants to say that Benedito is worse. Like, he's just, and maybe it's because he never had a time when he was a good guy. Like, the story we got is that even as a child, he was difficult, that he was selfish and violent. So his entire life, he's been a villain, whereas Monte Cristo turned into a villain.
Yeah. Definitely possible. It's hard to say because we like the Count so much because we know Edmund, right? Like, we don't like the Count, we like Edmund, and he's a part of the Count.
Yes.
Which is the
and I don't think Benedito ever had a time where he was like the Count, where he was like Edmund.
Yeah.
He seems to have always been nasty.
Yeah. Oh, so it was as if he died in Chateau d'If and only his wrath escaped.
His wraith. Yes. Oh, yes. Very interesting.
Yep. And he's haunting his villains.
Yeah.
Yes, I like that.
I mean, they took him out in a shroud and threw him in the ocean. Like, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's so interesting.
Very interesting.
Sarah loves the book, in the end that he really did die, and it's been his ghost all along. That would be a very different story.
Yeah, I read this book with Sarah years ago, so she and I love this book together.
I like this interpretation a lot.
Yes. I love the idea, or I like the idea that Monte Cristo is working on alienating Albert and Mercedes from Ferdinand. Really, all he has to do is reveal to them who Ferdinand is. Interesting. Sometimes Monte Cristo reminds me of Dexter.
That's hilarious that you say that, because I had that thought in my mind too, of like, you know, the villain. When we were talking about those stories, those psychopath stories, that's what I was thinking of. I've never read a Dexter, but like I've seen commercials and stuff for the movie, and so I was like, yeah, totally a Dexter.
The villain who's taking care of other villains.
Yeah, you know, the murderer with a kind heart or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Too funny. Oh, Sarah says, in this case, 3 facts that the books were allowed, not 3. The fact that the book was written in an episodic fashion worked to its benefit. It allowed Dumas the time to create the intensely complex world. So, definitely helped instead of just writing one big giant book at one time.
It's interesting because there's sometimes where I read books, classics that I know were episodic, and I can tell because you were like, they are totally padding the story here because they get paid for each episode, and there's times where you can just tell where they're padding it a little bit, but I don't
They're
get
paid
that.
by the word.
Yeah, I don't get that impression at all in this book. Everything matters so far.
Yeah. Everything has a purpose.
Yeah.
Like everything is well placed. Every scene is required. And nothing is extra.
Yeah. Sometimes like with, I've never read the full Les Mis, but I know a little bit and I've seen the musicals and stuff. But I know like there's sections where like there's like these, it's almost like he inserts an essay inside the story on like, Waterloo or, the sewers. Yeah. So it's the moments like that where you're like, was he being paid per word? Is this really necessary for the story?
He did the same thing in the Notre Dame book, The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
I just love that. Don't tell me that.
Sorry. He does essays on the architecture of Paris in that book. And it actually is related to his purpose for writing the book in that case, because he's trying to save Notre Dame. So he's writing the story about it. And I thought that was really interesting. But I'm not sure about Les Mis. If his asides were about various matters, not just the architecture or something. So I don't know.
And maybe it's not about padding. Maybe it's just that these were things that the authors themselves were really interested in and wanted to just include them, right? Like Moby Dick is another one. I've never read it, but it's my husband's favorite book. And it's got an essay inserted into it about whales, so you just wonder if like maybe the author just really loved whales and wanted to include that. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah, sometimes the authors just get paid a lot extra, and you're like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. When I read War and Peace,
this size, it's impressive. We haven't gotten any essays in here.
No, we haven't. And I think that's where Dumas is different. I read The Three Musketeers, and I didn't like it, but I did read it as well, and there was nothing like that in it. And then I've also read one of his true crime books, because he wrote like 3 true crime books, and one of them was about the Borgias, and I read that one, and there was nothing like that either. So I don't think he writes like essays in his work.
Okay. Yeah.
So, at least for the 3 I've read. Just doesn't seem his style.
No.
He just does character backstories that long.
Yeah.
But then it all has a purpose, right? Like, and we haven't talked about Haiti yet, or Hadi.
Oh yes, it's because I didn't write her down. I don't know why I didn't. That was fascinating about her. Who is she? I still need more information.
You'll get it. It's coming up.
Okay. All right. Good. Yes. Because I mean, he says that she's a slave, but like he treats her so she gets her own apartments. I don't get the impression that she's his mistress. He kind of almost treats her more like a daughter than that. But like, yeah.
But whose daughter would she be?
Yeah, exactly. And what role is she going to play? I'm very fascinated.
It's really interesting with the Count, where he picks up these slaves or like these servants from all around who like are in trouble, where they're about to die, or they are in peril. And like with her, you kind of got that idea earlier, but like you don't know what her problem was yet. But like, with Ali, that he was about to die, and like he just picks up these slaves and these servants, and he's like basically saving their lives. So you're like, oh, he's a good guy. And then yes, he was like, oh, I'd kill Ali instead of like letting him go free. Like, it's like, and then Ali's like, oh yes, that's wonderful, master. And you're like, okay, something strange here. But at the same time, he's like saving these people. So you have another good side to him where he's like wandering around. He's like, actually don't need a servant, but I'll save your life. You're like,
Yeah, I mean, he
you're
treats
so
them very
good.
well. It seems he treats them very well, and they're intensely loyal to him.
Yeah, so it shows how good he is to them in the treatment and in the way that he cares for them. So it's just really interesting how he takes care of his household.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's true.
We'll find out more about Hadi next time, or Hadi. I don't know how audiobook
Yes.
pronounced her. I didn't listen to that part.
I'm looking forward to as well thinking more about the symbolism of the story because the undead thing, that is so interesting to me. And I know that him being the Count of Monte Cristo, I'm sure the island, there's symbolism there, but I haven't quite thought it out yet. So I'm going to have to be looking for more symbols. I love doing that with classic works because those authors just love to do that, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting, all the different symbolism and all the different characters, and
Yeah, it adds a lot to my reading of a story.
yeah.
Yeah, the Count of Monte Cristo part, that is interesting to me. And I hope we get more of that, because people know that it's an uninhabited island, and he obviously just gave himself the title, but it seems like nobody cares because he has so much money. If he didn't have all that money, they would be questioning it.
Yep.
I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, but why has nobody really considered why someone would want to be the count of this uninhabited island that's useless, that doesn't have anything, right? It's got no history or no family connections or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's very true.
Oh, and then that reminds me, right towards the end too, we get Villefort and that conversation with Madame Danglars in his office at his office, and he decides that he needs to look into Monte Cristo more closely. So that I was like, oh, how far is he going to get? And is that where we're going to start to get, people are going to start to realize who maybe he really is.
Yeah. Or I wonder if they're going to be like, we don't know anything. Like, he's a ghost. Maybe literally, but he's a ghost. We don't know anything. He appeared out of nowhere, maybe. That'd be very strange to have.
Yeah. Because like you said, Villefort likes his secrets, right? And I think that also means he likes discovering other people's secrets.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm very interested to see where that goes too.
Yeah. It'll be very intriguing to see what happens going forward with that whole investigation, because he was investigating his child, like his son, before, but now he has renewed passion to investigate the Count because of his son. Mm-hmm. So something's going on.
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's a good book. It's a good book. Whoever decided this was the one we're going to read, you're a genius. It's a good book.
Good job, Naomi.
It was
maybe we should read Notre Dame next year.
I do own it now. I was like, I'll read it off of Christy's recommendation, and now I'm scared about the passages of essays. But I got through a mess with those passages of essays. I can get through those ones. I really enjoy doing our summer read-alongs and having these big projects. It's really fun.
I'm pretty sure that this is the first French classic that I've ever read.
Wow.
Because I've never fully read Les Mis yet. I started it and then it got put down, and I need to finish it. But I always end up having other big classics on the go, and I'm like, I can't do two at once. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is. Yeah.
I feel like it's a read along like this that I require to get through long books now, because talking face to face with people for me is like the payoff. So if I'd only have like one live show for a giant book, then I don't always make it. But if there's 5 live shows, I can make it to the next section. I can do it, you know.
Like 100 pages.
We'll talk at the end of the week.
Yeah. It's totally true. Because I mean, this book has been sitting on my shelf for years, like probably 20 years. And I've never picked it up. And I'm sure this has something to do with it, that it's, it's so daunting. But it's, it's doable like this, where it's been sectioned out and you get to talk about it all the way through. It just makes it doable and so enjoyable.
Yeah. It's definitely fun also to like talk about each section so you can try to like guess ahead with everyone else. I enjoy that.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a few more comments that we can go through. There were some about the essay pits, because that's the case. Serialized manga book that Sarah has come across. It's over 1,000 chapters long. Plot the whole time.
Wow.
Wow.
That's a big job.
Is that multiple is that multiple books then, or is it one manga book? That I can't imagine it would be that long.
It's a long
it would probably
series
be
of
multiple
mangas.
volumes.
Right. Okay.
It have to be many volumes.
Yeah.
I wonder if Dumas was also commenting on the French worldview. Everyone seems to be giving him a random Southern Mediterranean ethnicity. So interesting.
Oh,
yeah, that's also interesting because no one really knows where he's from either. They can't really nail it down.
No.
Yeah.
They're all like, he's from somewhere, but not here. And little do they know, born and raised, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. It changes enough that I often thought of the assumption of the character rather than the count telling the stories.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's really interesting with the context of Monte Cristo's attitude towards slaves.
Yeah.
Yes. Just something that I was like, that's really interesting. I've never noticed that before. Not the last time I read it either. So it was really interesting to note this time. And then the last comment, unless anyone else has something quickly to add, quickly become a favorite author for me after Three Musketeers and Monte Cristo. I want to read more of his work. I'm glad you enjoyed the Three Musketeers. I didn't, but that's just me. So I'm happy that this one is still a favorite. And I did really enjoy his true crime book that I read. So I want to read more from him as well. I think it was just the one-off that I didn't like. I hope.
That's fair enough. You don't have to love every book that an author writes.
Yep. I have some Agatha Christie's that are like 2-star books, and that's okay because she's still my favorite author of all time.
Yep, totally. Me too. I was like, I really don't like the big four at all, but that doesn't stop me from saying, yeah, Agatha Christie is my favorite.
Yes. Even with like Dostoevsky, who is one of my top 5 authors, like people will pick different books as their favorite, and they're all recognized for different reasons. I had a lot of trouble with the brothers Karamazov, even though everybody's like, oh, that's his masterpiece, but I struggled with that one. It was like too big brain for me. But I still liked it, but it was just more difficult for me than his other works.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think that's just something that us as readers need to recognize. I've gotten a couple comments that all of my Jane Austen books are not 5 stars. And I'm like, she's not always a 5-star author. She has great 5-star books, but they're not all 5 stars. So
yes. And they don't have to be. We can just be grateful for what an author gave us.
They're still good. That just doesn't mean they're 5 stars. So we don't have to be complaining about it. So, yeah, very, very funny, but it's true, right? So we don't always have to be thinking everything is always perfect, but yeah.
No.
It's good. So hopefully we can read the next section and see what happens to Ferdinand and Mercedes. The ball should be interesting. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yes.
Yeah. And then who knows what will happen with Franz if he's coming back and that whole situation.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it'll be a very interesting section for us to read. And then one more before the end. So
amazing. We're really getting through this. Like, I feel like if I read this on my own, it wouldn't take me 2.5 months. It would probably take me a year by myself. But I feel like we're really plowing through it, It's good.
Yeah. It's good to keep a pace so we don't forget everything.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I think we have a nice system.
Yes. And we're hoping Victoria can join us for the last one. Hopefully.
Yes, hopefully. That would be great.
She now has a schedule conflict, unfortunately. So we'll see her hopefully in August. As long as
Yes.
baby's not here yet for her.
Yeah.
But
We'll have to
yeah.
see.
If she isn't here, we'll totally be happy for her because we'll know why.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess that will be it then. No,
All right.
All right.
So,
Bye, everybody.
bye. Thanks for joining us.
Bye. Thank you for the comments.
Good discussion.